Order. So, Robin, do you want to start us off with a roll call?
Sure. Member Morris?
Here.
Member Covey?
Here.
Member Crow?
Here.
Member Rockwell?
Here.
Member Paul?
Here.
Member Sperlingwood is absent. Chair Jacobson is absent. And Vice Chair Fultz.
Here.
Thank you. Doing that from memory, so hopefully I didn't miss anyone. I think I got you all.
Anybody get left out? All right. So I was going to move for adoption of the agenda. As you guys have noticed already, this is a new format for the agenda. And so normally we would have a public comment section kind of towards the beginning of the meeting. And with this new agenda, it just got pushed to the end of the meeting. And so I wanted to see if folks would like to make a motion to amend the agenda, since we have people from the public here tonight, to have a public comment section towards the beginning of the meeting as well. Would anybody like to make that motion?
Also move.
Okay.
Second. Second.
All right. So we'll vote to adopt the agenda modified to include some public comment right after approval of the minutes. If that's okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right. Our next item on here is approval of the minutes. And if you all have had a chance to look, you will notice that we also had some issues with the minutes because of this new system that we're using. And so we have kind of two options with this. One is Robin can just, or anybody else can just briefly sort of outline the changes we want to make to the minutes, and then we can approve the minutes with those changes. Or if it just looks like too much of a mess to deal with tonight, we can just push this back and approve these minutes at a future meeting. Anybody have a preference?
I think we should just wait for updated minutes.
I'm certainly okay with that. Other folks okay if we just wait to approve the minutes at a future meeting? Give Robin a chance to make any changes you want to make? Okay, good deal. All right, so we'll move that to a future meeting. All right, so that will bring us to public comment. Basically, anybody from the public that would like to speak to an item that's not on the agenda already, if you could come on up and state your name for the record, and try to keep your comments to 3 minutes or less if you could. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Angela Castile. Not sure if you guys remember me, but I'm here. The fact that I feel that the only ones who have listened to the community at all are two commissioners that spoke with people while we were in recess at the city commission. I know you guys don't have much to do with deciding factors, but you do. You are our voice. As a community, you, Tony, are our voice. Well, now my family is at a point that we need help. And I just spoke with you about that. The $370 deposit would have been absolutely wonderful to get back to put towards our electric bill. Now, I'm not saying that I can't get help, because I've already gotten help for $100 of it. However, the fact of the matter is, these bills are going up, and your community is literally dying out. People are becoming homeless. People are not. They're not sustaining. They're not. And I have brought up before several things that could be done. The deposits, giving the deposits back to everyone who's been there for a year or more. Yes, you may have people that get shut off or whatever. Okay, I understand that. And I understand exactly what Tony said, that, that deposit's there so that other people don't have to pay the other bill. However, if you charge $5 a billing cycle to build that deposit back up, it's there again in case somebody needs it. The other thing is the budget billing. We understand that the year didn't work, but what about going quarterly What about going 6 months? That's making sure that people are owing less in that point of time. And, you know, it was brought up the last UAB meeting, I believe, that, or the last UAB that I was here, even going out the year and driving it, I can't remember which one of you it was, but driving it over the next year. You know, there is some aid out there like that, and I don't understand why it's not being looked at. As far as numbers go, I pulled public records, and I'm not sure which ones I'm supposed to be looking at because I've got Dunning disconnects. September so far, 1,045. 1,045. Tell me that is not a problem. So, yeah, that's all I have to say.
Anybody else from the public like to speak to an item that's not on the agenda for tonight?
Thank you so much. My name is Wendy Noon. I'm a researcher. I'm coming up here because GRU should be solar and should be solar now because it will bring in money immediately. And I think that the people in Gainesville are very, very in favor of making our schools, our GRU, anything that we pay taxes on should be solar. And that's the most important thing is that we start paying off our debt. GRU has debts. I'm not quite sure why. I'm not quite sure I agree with all of them, but they do have debts and they need to be paid. And instead of getting strangled by huge interest, we could be paying it off and start building up our city and county. And that's basically we get it free. We're the Sunshine State. We ought to be setting example for the rest of the tropical states. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public like to speak to an item that's not on the agenda tonight? All right. Tony, did you want to respond to any of those comments?
Sure. So a couple of things. I'll start backwards and talk a little bit about solar. So GRU, we do currently have a contract for a contractor to install 50 megawatts of solar. It's under what will be a purchase power agreement, which they will build the solar. We then commit to buying that solar from them over a period of time. So that contract, they're still working on that and developing that. We're hoping that gets into play here shortly. And then we're also continuing to look at other ways to put solar in. We need to make sure whenever we do any of these types of things that we're doing those in a cost-effective way that aren't going to raise costs for customers. And so that's really what we're doing. And looking at as we go forward and into the future, that solar continues to be a competitive thing that we can add to our system. And especially as we get into the integrated resource plan, which we will be presenting on tonight, that will be a major aspect of that. The second thing I'd like to cover is, several things, again, with natural gas prices as high as they are, with as hot as the summer is, their bills are high this summer, and everybody obviously don't need to say that everybody is experiencing that. As part of that, we're really trying to figure out things that we can do to assist customers. As the young lady got up to talk about deposits, we have refunded deposits for customers that had their deposits more than a year. So current policy is you hold deposits for 24 months. We've adjusted that to 12 months, but there are some criteria associated with that I think the young lady is referencing, where if there's a history of non-payment or late payments, then deposits weren't returned. So we're still continuing to try to look at that policy to see if there are things we can do. So I appreciate the input. We're trying to figure out if there's ways that we can get some of that deposit back in customers' hands. So we're looking at that. The other thing that I will say, and I know this doesn't apply to everyone, but there are social service programs that we work with, that GRU works with, that are providing assistance to customers. So really encourage folks to look at our website or call customer service 352-334-3434, because they can they can point you toward several things. One is these social service agencies that are helping, and just to kind of put it in perspective, I looked at the last several months, it's typically around $250,000 to $300,000 per month that these agencies are helping customers with direct payment of their utility bills. But again, not everyone may qualify, and so I understand that. Let's see. I'm looking at my notes from Angela, your thing. She brought up Budget Pay. So Budget Pay was a program that we had in the past. What Budget Pay does is it looks at your average utility bill and then kind of says, okay, on average it's $300 a month, and so it just is $300 a month all year, regardless of kind of what your usage is. And then at the end of the year, there has to be a true up to your actual usage. We stopped we stopped adding new people. There are some folks that are still on Budget Pay, but we stopped adding new because customers were very concerned because they'd get to the end of the year and there'd be this pretty big true up they had to make up, and they didn't know that, and they weren't prepared for that. I think the recommendation, and I think it's something we can consider, is try to do true ups like that more frequently so you don't get out of bounds, and try to bring Budget Pay back. What I would say to that is we're implementing a new billing system in February of next year. I guess it's March 1st, actually. That would be a good opportunity to bring that back. That has additional functionality that our existing billing system did not have. And so we will kind of evaluate what does that look like, and what does a program look like, and see if there are a lot of customers that are interested in something like that. Again, the challenge with that is if we had Budget Pay in this year with the volatility of natural gas prices, we would have had a lot of customers that had a pretty large true up. And so we'd have to figure out maybe some triggers to keep that from occurring. Let's see. Yeah, so I think that those were the main things. Again, understand the concern. I will just say briefly, there was an article in Bloomberg News. 1 in 6 utility customers across the United States are behind on their utility bills. This is a very major issue and challenge in the United States and in the world. And so we're trying to do these little things, ultimately to try to assist customers through this difficult time. I will say the biggest, most immediate impact anybody can make to their utility bill is trying to figure out ways to use a little less energy or a little less water. And so if there are things that you can think of to do, and I know that's not a panacea, that doesn't solve everything, but I will say that is something. I've talked to a number of customers that don't turn their air up when they leave for the day or something like that. So I do want to add that to the other things that we're doing as things that you can do to help affect your bill. But then ultimately calling our customer service folks. We do have, again, contacts with social service agencies. We do have payment plans. I'm sorry, I didn't touch on the disconnects. If customers call, if you're getting close to a disconnect, we essentially give you 35 days after your bill is due before a disconnect would happen. So you essentially have a little over a month. If you call and start to make some payments, that can be extended further and further. So if you're in a situation like that where you can make a little bit of a payment and make a movement toward it, please call us and arrange for that, because that is something else that can help and really avoid that from occurring. And so, yeah, I mean, we do not want the customers to get into that situation, so we're wanting to work with them as they work toward that. So I think I tried to address most of the issues. I know all the answers aren't all perfect, but again, we're trying to do everything we can and keep that education and keep that, transparent of what the challenges are and what's available for customers. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Fletch, I think your light's on, yeah?
Yeah, thank you. I just have two quick questions. Mr. Chair, tonight we have a good number of people, more than we normally do. Do we know if there's a particular organization or church or class or anything that's represented by these people and together? Is there any group that we should recognize or anything?
Well, I just mentioned too, there will be, there's a couple of items on the agenda that are probably of interest to some folks that are here.
Okay.
And then there will be another time towards the end of the meeting for a second go around with public comment. So if anything occurs to somebody that they want to say during the meeting, or you just want another opportunity to speak, there will be a chance for that towards the end of the meeting as well.
All right, thanks.
And Tony, I just wanted to, I do hope we'll revisit the conversation about budget billing. Two things that occur to me just based on what you said were, one, especially with the new functionality of the new billing system, it might not be such a difficult thing to let people know what their true up is going to be well in advance. I mean, you could actually see that on the bill from month to month, kind of what your ongoing true up is. And then secondly, instead of asking people to true up, say, at the end of the year when we're talking about Christmas and that sort of thing, what if we did it at tax return time, which is when a lot of people that are lower income might be getting some money back from the government, could use that to true up if they needed to. But anyway, I'm sure we could have a lot more conversations about this to make it work better if there's enough interest from the customer base to make it feasible.
Yeah, and Mr. Chair, I will add one more thing. Thinking long term, this isn't something this summer, but going into next summer, we're really going to start to have the automated metering infrastructure in place, which is going to provide a lot more information for customers throughout the month to kind of see how much they're using and what their bill is looking, trending toward. So that'll be more information for customers, so it's not as big of a surprise at the end of the month, kind of where they are. And so we'll have a lot more functionality and tools for customers beginning next summer. So what's going to happen is as we get the system in place, some customers are going to have those meters and be able to do that, and then a couple months later, other customers, and that'll begin next summer. So so that's another longer term solution, but that's not something immediate.
All right, if folks are ready, I think we'll go ahead and move on to our first, state of the utility, actually. That's next on the agenda. Thanks.
So, Mr. Chair, I know we have a lot on the agenda and folks are here, so I'm going to be rather brief. Just want to touch on a couple of things. One, we're reestablishing a cadet program. It's called a cadet program. It's like the old utility academy if people have been around for years. It's a program to really bring new people in our community, start to train them up to get them ready for jobs at the utility. And so it actually has three segments. It's police, fire, and utility. And so we're working with Santa Fe College right now to get an agreement together. Once that's in place, we'll be able to, early next year, start looking at filling some of those positions and starting that program. So again, it's looking for local folks to fill the workforce going forward. Second thing is one of the things we do on the safety side for the employees in our community is we do what are called safety observations. And so this year we've had over 3,000 of those completed by our employees. That really provides a situational awareness for employees to see what's happening around them, to observe what's happening around them. And then we have a zero tolerance policy basically, which allows any employee to kind of stop work and say, hey, this isn't safe, let's do something different. And so trying to continue to encourage that safety culture with our employees. The other thing I wanted to touch on is we've had a lot of wet weather. We're in the middle of hurricane season, so September 10th was the peak of hurricane season, and luckily this year we haven't had anything impact the utility. but we're obviously prepared and ready for that. But what I will say is even without a hurricane, we've actually had extremely wet weather and it's caused flooding throughout our system. And so what happens with flood waters is they typically impact our wastewater system. And so with many of these flooding events, we've had to keep up with them through hauling of wastewater out of lift stations or manholes in order to keep the system functioning properly. And so staff has responded well to that, and we're, again, prepared for that, and folks are on standby on nights and weekends to do that, and that will continue to happen. So we do some of that emergency response isn't just during massive events like a hurricane, but even some of these microbursts or storms that they're responding to. And then the last thing to really touch on is we're evaluating bids right now for Deer Haven 1 lifetime assessment. And what that is Deer Haven 1 is approaching 50 years old. At the end of this year, Deer Haven 1, Unit 1 will be 50 years old. And so what we do is we do a lifetime assessment, and what you're trying to do there is look at the condition of the plant and see if we can extend the life of the plant, because that allows us to not spend additional funds to build a new facility at this time, but extend the life of that existing facility. And so that's the hope, is that when we do that assessment, we'll be able to extend the life of that for several years into the future. And so we're looking at bids right now. We'll award a bid, and we'll have an organization come in to help do that lifetime assessment, and then hopefully extend the life of that unit. Those older units, there's good and bad. The good is you don't have to build a new unit, and so that you save that cost. The challenge side is with older units, they don't run as efficiently, and so they're a little more expensive and less efficient to run. But we're hoping we can continue to extend the life of this unit to keep those costs down overall. And then the last one is really the ITN intent to negotiate for our IRP. Where that's currently out on the street, and we'll have somebody tonight giving a presentation on that, so I won't get into that anymore at this time. So that's the brief update.
Thanks. Any members, any questions or responses to Tony from State of Utility?
Relative to hurricanes, do we have an essential customer list?
So yeah, we do. We have critical customers. I can't off of memory think of how many, but we have a list of critical customers to restore power, more quickly. Obviously, like hospitals and things like that. There are several large customers typically have generators, and even a lot of those critical customers. I know I had a neighbor that they were a critical customer because their son is on a battery pack for breathing. And so, yeah, we have a list of those, and they're priority customers when we look at restoration.
And is there a process, what do you call it, to approach the utility on that? To become an essential customer or priority customer?
Priority customer, yeah. So I'm not sure off the top of my head what that process is, but what I would say is go ahead and call if you think you fall into that category. Go ahead and call customer service, and we'll direct you to the right person.
Any other member questions, comments on State of the Utility before we move on? Alrighty, so our first business item tonight is natural gas appliance rebate discussion.
So, Mr. Chair, Eric Walters is going to come up and give a presentation. So there's been several questions in the community. City Commission has asked for evaluation of our rebates. And so what we wanted to do, and there's been some meetings with the UAB historically. There's been some meetings and discussion on this. What we wanted to do tonight is really kind of go through the program, why we have it, what it provides, and then we do have a recommendation at the end. What I would say at the beginning of the presentation here is that we don't have to get to a recommendation at the end of this. This could be a discussion if you all have a lot of questions, since for several of the members this is the first time this is coming up. If you all have questions or you want us to delve deeper into certain aspects of this, we can go from this meeting and have another one that furthers the discussion, but we wanted to put a staff recommendation on the table so that you understood kind of where we were coming from and what we're recommending as a utility. So with that, I'm going to have Eric give the presentation. Bianca is also here from the city attorney's office because there's some legal components to, I guess, some different ideas and approaches to this. And so she's available to answer those legal questions. The last thing I will say is that I think we were just discussing this, earlier in the week. I think it probably works better to have Eric go through the whole presentation so that we're not asking questions that are answered later, but then we can go back to slides as members have comments or want to delve into things deeper. So if Eric can kind of go through the whole presentation and then we can come back. Eric is the sustainability officer at GRU. And so what that really entails is really trying to develop solutions and things that we're doing long-term that balance cost with the environment and with equity with our customers. And so he tries to look through everything through that lens, and that will be part of the discussion tonight. So Eric, with that.
All right, thank you, Tony. Chair members, as I said, my name is Eric Walters, Interim Chief Sustainability Officer for GRU. And before we get started with the slides, I just want to reiterate what Tony says. This really is a discussion. This is a big issue. This is something that we've been talking about a number of times. And I want to start off by saying there's kind of an elephant in the room, right? There are some members of the public that believe that we should get rid of natural gas at all cost. There may be some members on the board that believe that. And I'm here to say that we're not claiming to be experts on why folks believe that, why they get to that thinking, how they come to that conclusion, but we do want to engage in a discussion around that, right? So I speculate that one of the main reasons is probably climate change and a desire to move away from fossil fuels, right? I don't think GRU disagrees with that. I think that's something that we can all coalesce around. I think the discussion really becomes how we do that. So I'm going to venture to say that whatever I have in this presentation is not going to change those folks' minds, okay? And to be quite honest, it's not intended to. This is meant to be a discussion around what we do and why. So when we look at that, as Tony said, I'm standing here kind of as the new guy in this new position that's just been created. Chief Sustainability Officer, what the heck is that, and how does it apply to what we're talking about tonight? Well, as Tony said, when you look at sustainability, there's a three-prong approach, a three-pillar approach, I like to call it. Number one is environmental stewardship, to make sure that you are paying attention to the environment, and then to make sure that you are putting that where it needs to go. The second is economics. As we've already heard from customers, I hear every day, I hear all the time, costs impact people. And so we cannot ignore those. Those have to be a factor in our decisions. And the third part of that is people. And when I talk about people, I'm not just talking about customers. I'm talking about the community as a whole, and I'm talking about our employees. All folks are affected by that. So I think of this, I'm a very visual person, so I think of this as a three-pronged stool, right? If you look at a three-pronged stool, a three-legged stool, if all those legs are the same length, then that stool is balanced. You can sit on that and be comfortable that you're not going to fall over. If you short one of those legs, that stool becomes unbalanced. If you extend one of those legs too long, that stool becomes unbalanced. The same result. I see my job as a sustainability officer to look at a balanced approach to these questions, these issues, these topics. If I hyper-focus on something, I can't do that. If I focus more on one topic than the others, then I'm doing a disservice. If I ignore one and focus on two others, then I'm doing a disservice. The idea here is to come up with a balanced approach and make sure that we're putting those forward. And that's the perspective that you're going to hear tonight, right? We're going to talk about customer benefits. We're going to talk about environmental stewardship. We're going to talk about cost and impact to the utility and customers. So with that, I will go ahead and get started. So first, let's talk a little bit about.
Sorry, Eric.
Sure.
The screen in the back is not on for the board to see.
Is that projector not working? So I think we can keep going, but I think they're working on it in the back.
You guys got it?
Most of them have it.
Okay. So what are our current natural gas rebates? Currently, we offer natural gas, offer incentives for natural gas appliances up to $1,600 per home. You can see the breakdown here that applies to. I'll let him do his thing. No problem.
Thanks, Patrick.
Highly technical fix.
So that applies to water heaters, up to $500 for the first and $300 for the second. Furnaces, $500 for the first, $300 for the second, and also cooking range and dryer. When we look at the average rebate, it comes to about $750. When you look at our gas sales and revenues that come from that, we recover that cost in about 3 years of gas sales with that customer. One other note that needs to be made too is there are also additional federal tax credits that are available for high efficiency water heaters and furnaces that are installed from the federal government. So why does GRU offer natural gas rebates? It's a multi-pronged approach and a multi-pronged answer to that question. The first is natural gas appliances actually lower our peak demand. That results in lower capital expenditures and generation equipment. Utilities and making power are very asset and capital intensive, which means you make investments now for the long term, 30 years from now. When you need less megawatts, that means you can build smaller units. That means that your capital costs and your expenditures to not only operate but maintain those units go down. Natural gas is usually more effective, cost effective for customers than electricity. There's a direct use of natural gas in appliances is usually more efficient than the use of natural gas to make electricity. Just the thermodynamics that go with that process, and I'll get a little bit more into the details with that as we go forward. Another benefit is that the natural gas system can expand outside of GRU's electric service territory, which gives us the ability, the opportunity to add incremental revenue. So when you look at our electric territory, it is defined. We cannot go outside that territory. With natural gas, there is no definition of that border, right? So if any customers that are close to our system want that, then there is an opportunity there for us. There was a previous question about rebates and locations and are they issued inside the city limits, outside the city limits, service territory, what have you. And it's about half and half, right? So if you look at that, 54% of new gas customers are actually outside of our service territory, electric service territory. And then about 46% of new gas customers are inside our electric service territory. So it's about half and half when you strictly look at the numbers. So now let's jump to the next slide. I know there's a lot on this slide, so I'm going to walk through it slowly. What happens, we're looking at the overall CO2 emissions and the effects, right? If you look at electric appliances versus gas appliances, you're talking about water heaters and you're talking about heat pumps or ACs or what have you. When we look at this calculation, we're looking at the average of what's installed in a home. If you look at a brand new home, a higher end home, it may have the highest efficiency that's there, right? But overall, most of our customers don't have that. They have an average efficiency unit, either water heater or AC pump, right? So when we look at operational efficiency, looking at this first bullet here, our incremental heat rate, which is basically a measure of our efficiency of the units. Our overall incremental heat rate is about 11,000 BTUs, right, per kWh. That equates to around a 31% efficiency. So if I translate that, the energy that's in natural gas that we burn, only 31% of that energy actually makes it into electricity coming out the end of the generator, okay? That's a simple efficiency equation. That's the translation. So you've got 31% efficiency there. So it comes out of the generator, and now you've got to deliver it to the customers for them to use. You've got wires and poles and transformers. The average loss around that is about another 2%. So when you add those two together, you've got about a 29% efficiency from natural gas used to create electricity. And it's thermo. When you look at the holistic carbon efficiency, you're looking at a comparison and you're assuming that the electric appliances that are used to make that are being supplied by energy or electricity being created by natural gas. Yes, we do have a biomass plant. It's about a third of our energy source. More than 60 to 65% of our energy right now is coming from natural gas. And so there's a high likelihood that that is the case. So that was the assumption that we were talking about here. When you look at the efficiencies, just on its own, you have a gas water heater, you have about a 60% efficiency. In other words, 60% of that energy from the natural gas actually makes it to heat your water. When you look at the holistic carbon efficiency, obviously there's no electricity used, so that efficiency is equivalent. When you roll down to the electric water heater, you've got a 90% thermodynamic efficiency that's there, right? When you look at the holistic carbon, that goes down to about 26%, assuming, right, that your energy that you use is created by natural gas. You create the electricity, and then it's transmitted to your home. So there's a difference there. When you look at space heating, it's about the same. When you look at natural gas furnace efficiency, it's about 80%. Obviously, if there's no electricity used, that efficiency stays the same. When you look at an efficient heat pump, these are great numbers, right, for average efficiency. But when you're powering that from electricity coming from the grid, that does drop down significantly to the 70%. And so when you're looking at what's going on here, we're just trying to show that there is a loss from creating electricity from natural gas at a power plant and delivering it to the home. And that loss essentially is paid for by the end customer. So we've talked a little bit about environmental impacts. Let's talk a little bit about financial impacts. So there are customer financial benefits. When you look at natural gas, water heater and a natural gas furnace, the average customer will save about $500 per year using the same equipment but the electric version, okay? Using standard efficiency, again, higher efficiency gets you a different number, but using standard efficiency, there's about a $500 savings there. Looking at GRU financials, again, our electric territory is defined. We cannot go outside of that. When you look at natural gas and adding customers, there is the opportunity for incremental revenue. The average customer uses about 240 natural gas therms per year, and that brings in an incremental revenue to the utility of about $270 if you include the sale for gas itself and also the customer charge associated with the meter. So like other utilities, the natural gas system is largely fixed cost and a relatively small variable cost. So any additional incremental revenue directly goes back to offset the cost. So just to give you a comparison, FY20 and FY21, the natural gas system contributed to about $2.4 million to the general fund transfer. So there's always the question about environmental stewardship and what we should be doing. We're always looking, and part of my job is to look out at what is coming, right? Tony mentioned the IRP, and you're stuck with me again for that presentation. I'll give you kind of an update on where we are. But we're always looking at what future technology is coming, what can be a benefit, what can help us reduce our carbon footprint and our impact to the environment. So this is a discussion of some of those things that are coming for gas. Now, are they in their infancy stage? Absolutely. They're starting off like just every other technology that was out there that we use today, right? But there's a lot of research, and we actually recently were awarded a grant to study the production of renewable natural gas from the decomposition of organic waste. So we're creating renewable natural gas that could be an offset to the actual use of natural gas, traditional natural gas. There's also a lot of talk and a lot of pilot programs going around green hydrogen, okay? And that's being produced with renewable energy, assuming that's the case. The most recent Inflation Reduction Act put a lot of emphasis on bringing the cost of that down so that when it comes to the market, it is a more viable option. Is there still work to do? Absolutely, there is. But these are two things that a lot of folks are working on. There's a lot of research and development that's going in those areas. And we do see potentially down the road this offsetting a portion of our natural gas use to our LDC customers and potentially our power production as well. So what are the impacts if GRU ceases natural gas appliance rebates? So the bulk of our customers are they're new construction, and the thought is that they may not feature those natural gas appliances. When we look at the incremental revenue, it's about $80,000 a year for an additional revenue every year that comes in. That is a little bit on the low side, but it's a good approximation. Essentially, that could possibly go away. When we talked about the CO2 efficiency of electric appliances versus the same natural gas appliances on site, there is an overall increase in CO2 when you're talking about that. You are looking at higher customer bills. It's now taking a lower cost source and then replacing it with a higher cost appliance. And then there's an increased likelihood of losing customers to propane or an alternative natural gas supplier. So can we quantify all of those? That's very hard to quantify. What do we cut down? If we stopped doing rebates, how much is that going to go down? I can't stand here and give you a precise answer. Will it have an impact? Yes. But there are things that we just don't know about the market. What other players are there? What other options there may be? There was also another question about how do GRU rebates compare to the rest of the state? And this is a slide that our team put together just comparing the rebates that are available in other systems across the state. So basically doing research and saying, hey, what do these people provide? So you see GRU provides roughly $1,600, as we discussed. When you look at Akaluka gas, it's a lot less. But when you start to look at the rest of the state, FPU, Florida City, Lake City, Tallahassee, Tico, those rebates are significantly higher. That's just for a comparison case. So I know I've moved kind of quickly, but in summary, talking back through what natural gas does for us, it helps to depress our electric peak. It's what we estimate to be about 30 megawatts. That's overall a decrease in purchase power cost, and fuel cost, and operational cost, and ultimately a deferral of having to build more megawatts to serve that load. Holistically, natural gas water heaters and furnaces emit less CO2 than electric resistant water heaters and heat pumps. So as we transition to renewable energy, that will obviously change, right? As we move and migrate from fossil fuels, that number does go down. But immediate stoppage does have an impact on that. Natural gas appliances and high-end heat pumps save customers money over traditional electrical appliance. And gas featuring renewable blends are on the horizon. It's something that we're looking at and trying to decide, okay, when this comes to fruition, how do we integrate that into our system? So really, to try to summarize what's happened here, try to answer the question, should natural gas appliance rebates be continued? And really just a summary and comparison if they are continued or if they're discontinued. So on the left, obviously, if natural gas rebates are continued, we talked about those CO2 emissions. We talked about the reduced risk, or reduced growth in peak electric demand, lower customer bills for the participants, annual revenue growth every year, incremental annual revenue growth, and also increased control over our future gas supply. We have more control over when we supply, how we supply, and how we transition customers over to renewable alternatives at that point. So if natural gas rebates are discontinued on the other side, We've talked about the CO2 emissions. You have the increased electrical demand. You have the higher customer bills, the lower revenue and GFT growth, and the increased likelihood of customers choosing propane or a competitor providing natural gas. There's many different reasons, as I said, about wanting to transition away from it, and this is just trying to summarize what they are. So, looking at the staff recommendation. So the official recommendation is that the UAB recommend to the City Commission that GRU continues the use of natural gas appliance rebates at this time, with a commitment to reevaluate the rebates as GRU establishes the path to meet the net zero resolution goal by 2045. And I'll close by saying this, right? This slide is unacceptable to that first group of folks that we talked about, okay? Their desire is to move away from natural gas right now and do it quickly. As I talked about, my job, I see it, is to provide a balanced and sustainable planning approach to that, to answer these questions that we have for the operation of the utilities, and remembering those three pillars that we've talked about: cost, environmental stewardship, and people. So this is really a complex issue. This is not something that we answer in one meeting. Obviously, we've had a few on these, right? This isn't something that we answer in one meeting. And because it's a complex problem, it's not something that we can decide by one factor alone. There has to be an honest, straightforward discussion about these impacts to really, truly solve this problem, right? There has to be a balanced approach, and we have to make sure that the impact and the decisions that we make now are not negatively impacting everyone else at another time. This doesn't say that we can kick the can down the road forever, right? But this does say that we've got a goal for net zero for 2045. A large part of that is going to be determined by the IRP. A large part of that is also going to be determined by what technology comes along to help us make that transition. What I'm saying is we need to take the time to make sure that we are planning, laying out, and executing a well thought out plan for that transition. Not a hasty decision, but a well thought out planned decision and transition. So this basically says we need further time to study what the impacts are, what the unintended consequences are, and how do we mitigate those, and how do we move forward. With that, I'm done.
Teresa, you got your light on?
I did. I had a question. You said this was a new position, the Chief Sustainability Officer?
Yes.
So what does that actually entail? And what did you do before you were the Chief Sustainability Officer?
Sure. I'll try and answer both of those.
Okay.
I know the answer to one at least. What I did before this, I was the Operations and Fuels Director for the utility. So the dispatch of the units, the most economical dispatch of the units, fuel procurement, buying, managing the fuel that the utility buys for generation, as well as generation planning for my department, right? So I lived this fuel situation very up close. I lived the dispatch and the regulation part of electric generation up close. So that was before I came into this role. Now coming into this role, there's really a step back to a strategic approach of what does a utility do as a whole to answer some of these big questions that we have, right? One of them is unified planning, prioritized planning for the entire utility, moving in one direction. A large part of what my goals for next year are the integrated resource plan and how do we affect that. Talking about EVs, how do we plan for that? How do we build the system? How should we design that program? How should it impact the utility and the customers? And the third part of that is really rooftop solar in general. How do we bring in more solar? How do we increase renewables in our system? How do we meet that net zero 2045 goal? So I'm kind of taking a broad approach to it, and as opposed to the more narrow focused approach. And so that's really the perspective. Did that answer your question? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Dan, did you come on? Or did you?
Mine, this one doesn't work.
Oh, okay.
So you don't know that it comes
I've
on.
got 10. Are you 10?
Yep,
Okay, it's on
But it
for me.
doesn't light
Oh,
up
it
over
doesn't for
here.
you. Okay, gotcha.
Right.
Gotcha.
sorry.
All right.
Hi, Eric. I have a couple of comments, but first, I thank you for the presentation, and I really have nothing to say about how this is framed. It's fine with me. I have a couple of neat questions, what do you call it, on the efficiency of the plants. Over the years, I've heard lively discussions among the engineers about the efficiency of the natural gas plants. Okay, about 2 weeks ago, I had a visitor from Utah, what do you call it, that was coming to the game. He happened to be an old boss of mine. He happened to also be the president of Utah, or Rocky Mountain Power, and had worked through about everything you can do in the 6 states out there. He said that he sent a whole bunch of chemical engineers and electrical engineers into a team to look at this very question about the efficiency of gas plants like this. And he said after months, they came back and they really settled in on 60% efficiencies, which is a far cry from 30. And then, well, I don't know how you all came with your numbers. I don't know how he came with his. But when you get to IRPs, this could get to be a big deal.
Great question, Chair. Members, there is a great question with that. A lot of the new gas technology that has been built has been large-scale combined cycles, and so you do approach 60% with those kinds of technology, right? So I think we have a combined, and I'm not going to quote it because I'm going to quote it wrong, but our combined cycle is a little less than that, but it is definitely higher than that 31% of efficiency, okay? When you look at our units, he talked about Unit 1. Unit 1 will be 50 years old in December. I'm not getting anywhere near 60% efficiency out of that.
Okay.
Unit 2 is, it'll be 42 years old, right? I am not getting 60% efficiency out of that, okay? The combined cycle that we have is vintage 2001. I am not getting 60% efficiency out of that. So all the generation that we have is not extremely, Dina would get mad at me. It is well seasoned, but the technology of the day was what it was, and now that we're dealing with that, 30, 40, 50 years later, that efficiency just isn't there for our system.
Okay. And I didn't mean to get into the thermodynamics of it.
No problem.
On page 6, and this is another nit, but we say that using 240 natural gas therms per year, the average incremental net revenue. Do we mean net profit there or net revenue? I'm not familiar with net revenues.
I believe that is net profit.
Net profit?
That should be net profit.
Okay, because we did spend something to get there, right?
Right.
All right. That's all.
Okay.
Nits.
No problem.
Any other members want to speak to the presentation or ask questions?
I'm sorry. When the time is appropriate, I did receive an email from Chair Jacobson, and I would like to read that into the record when the time is right.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a question. I can't remember if I know we've talked about the point that if we're not offering gas to customers, somebody else will. I can't remember if we've gotten into the details of what other companies are in the area that have the capacity to provide gas to local customers.
So that's a great question, and that's part of the reason why we need to really look at that. There are no other companies that have a direct line that's connecting to our system, right? It's a kind of an investment thing. But as you move outside of our system, you move into larger groups of population, then there could be a thought that, hey, I'm going to build my system into there and then take those customers, right? There's also a thought long term of, well, can somebody come in and just take our territory and start serving our customers? As it stands right now, no. We have a lot of, number one, assets in the ground. We have a lot of pipe in the ground. We also have a debt associated with those systems. So any transfer from us to someone else, they would have to come in and obviously offer us a fair market value and a fair market price for that. But as far as what other companies are out there, I can probably think of two that could possibly come in and do it. Do they have plans to if we remove rebates? I don't know the answer to that question.
And Mr. Chair, I'd just like to add, similar to what Mr. Walters is saying, early on when we were having this discussion, there was a lot of, speculation that if we stop offering rebates, there might be other companies that could. There are transmission mains that they could connect to and start building infrastructure to serve the area. Like Eric said, that we don't know if that's going to happen. We don't know that's for sure, but we want to kind of address that more, which is part of the why, hey, we want to look at this closer. So we want to know if we're going to stop the rebates, if another entity comes in and start building out a system, we're now out of the expansion of the natural gas business. And so stopping rebates could lead toward the market going to another provider. And ultimately, the goal in our community is to move towards net zero 2045. Well, if we are not the provider of the natural gas, we can't do anything to move it in that direction. And so we really want to have a better understanding of that before we make a decision like stopping rebates, which could mean stopping the expansion of our natural gas system and could mean other providers come in. If we stop those rebates, propane tank, company could come in and they put in propane and they put in devices that way. Another provider could start building out a network and provide natural gas. And so we want to answer that question a little more clearly before we make a decision to stop the rebates. And the other thing is we're trying to make these decisions towards net zero 2045, make them at the right time and the right increments so that we're balancing, as Eric has said, we're balancing the financial aspect and impact on our customers with the environmental aspect of natural gas versus renewable supplies. And as our system becomes more renewable on the electric side, then it might make more sense for those customers to move toward electric, or we have the ability to do things such as the renewable natural gas or green hydrogen, where those customers are in our service area and we have the ability to convert to these different technologies or fuel sources at the right time when it makes sense. And so that's kind of the short story, is we really want to answer some more of those questions before we start moving out of this space, so that we don't have the unintended consequences that Eric was referencing earlier.
Robin, do you want to go ahead and read us the chair's comments?
I'm sorry that I will not be present for the natural gas rebate presentation and discussion. I appreciate that GRU staff has taken the time to look at the details of CO2 impacts and of electric heat pumps. Previous GRU presentations lacked these. Despite what the former COO of GRU publicly said, I don't hate natural gas. I also don't hate the hardworking GRU natural gas staff. Much to the contrary, I greatly appreciate the hard work they put in every day. What I do hate is the impact that climate change is having and will increasingly have on the citizens of Gainesville and the rest of the world. These impacts will be worst for our disadvantaged communities, which is why I feel so strongly about these issues. One of the reasons that I'm on the UAB is to be part of a team that is looking into these issues in detail. The answers are not simple or clear-cut. We need to balance the impacts on GRU's budget, impacts of rates on people, and climate change impacts. We also need to look at short, medium, and long-term impacts. One important topic that was missed in the presentation is the city's goal of 100% renewables by 2045. Currently, renewables produce electricity, so putting natural gas appliances into new homes is moving us away from this goal. This is why there would be why there would need to be very strong reasons to continue the natural gas rebates. The presentation talks about renewable natural gas and green hydrogen, which have the potential of using the natural gas infrastructure in the move to 100% renewables. I applaud GRU's efforts in this. However, these options have significant hurdles. The ability to produce significant amounts of renewable natural gas from organic waste is in its infancy. Creating hydrogen from renewable energy electricity is inherently inefficient. It is always more efficient to use the electricity directly. While these efforts should be continued, I would not bet on them to be solutions in the near-term or medium-term horizons. These natural gas rebates are being used primarily for new construction, which will have higher efficiency heat pump systems for heating and cooling the home than the average home in Gainesville. Using a heat pump water heater would cancel out the cost and the CO2 efficiency differences with natural gas. The savings of $500 per year for natural gas were the same as we heard last year. In GRU territory, natural gas costs to the customers have risen 43% faster than electricity costs have risen. From a GRU and city perspective, customers within the city that have natural gas produce less profit than all electric customers. The holistic carbon efficiency accounting needs to take into account CO2 losses within the home and the equivalent impacts of methane, which are much higher than CO2. This would shift things considerably away from natural gas.
Any other member comment on this or questions for Eric? So I do want to echo Chair Jacobson's comments. I've stated before, I'm against the continuation of these rebates. If we look at the slide that talks about CO2 emissions and has all the different kinds of appliances there, I think it's Chair Jacobson pointed out, if we're going to be talking about making investments in folks, we should be investing in the things that give us the actual highest efficiency, which we can see here are the electric heat pump water heaters and the high efficiency heat pump ACs. I also think it's difficult to really sustain the argument that the rebates are improving significantly GRU's bottom line, because as we can see, 50% of these rebates are going to existing customers approximately, which basically, as we've established in previous meetings, is essentially cannibalizing already existing electric customers. So we're actually talking about a loss in revenue on that side that isn't being, to me, adequately factored into this conversation. And then as been pointed out by the general manager and by Eric, there's just a lot of hypotheticals here in terms of what could happen if we were to end these rebates. So, again, to come back to the question that Member Rockwell asked about who are some of these competitors that are potentially out there that are going to take our customers, are they offering rebates? How do we really know that by ending or reducing these rebates, there's going to be this big rush of potential customers that we're going to lose? From my perspective, I still haven't heard myself a satisfactory answer from the city attorney as to why these rebates couldn't be split, basically saying we're going to end the rebates for in-territory customers and only continue them if they bring us new customers that aren't existing customers that are outside of our territory. To me, that is the solution, even though my environmental friends don't like it when I say that. That is the solution that both gets us toward our carbon goals and grows GRU's customer base by only offering incentives to people who are outside our territory and are not existing customers. If that's not an option, as it seems to be the case, then to me, I think ultimately these investments could be better made in other ways that are truly win-wins for GRU and for our community, such as, for instance, electrification of our fleet, going after aggressively propane customers in our territory and trying to get them to convert. Those are, just a couple examples that occur to me that I think would be a much better use of these funds. So that's where I'm at on this. We've heard from a few other folks. If there are no other member comments, I'd like to hear from the public on this topic, if that's okay.
Mr. Chair, this Bianca from the city attorney's office is here and can address that issue first if you'd like.
That'd be great, yeah. If you're able to do that, Bianca, that would be wonderful.
Hello, everyone. Bianca Larison. I am the utility attorney. Your comment or your question about providing rebates to new natural gas customers that are outside of our electric service territory.
Can you adjust the microphone closer?
Your comment about providing rebates to new natural gas customers that are outside of the electric territory versus not providing the rebate to existing electric customers. I would first like to start off by saying both the new natural gas customers and existing customers in our electric service territory will be making the same investment for natural gas service. So in regards to the utilities transmission and distribution infrastructure. So if we look at our rates, just in general, they are subject to comprehensive regulation. So in a sense that they must be fair, just, and reasonable, and essentially not unduly discriminatory. So if we just take like a simple example, separate the classes of customers. So if we're talking about our electric customers, if you separate residential customers versus commercial customers, their rates would obviously be different, but they are different classes of customers. But if you're talking about within a class, if you're talking about just residential customers, then the rates must be uniform. So if we take from that principle and apply that to natural gas, we know that the principle that the customers should be treated equitably. So new customers may not be treated differently simply because they are new customers. And in this case, it would be providing them a rebate simply because they're new customers versus existing customers not being able to, existing electric customers not being able to benefit from the rebate. So existing customers should be able to receive the same type of benefits afforded to new customers. It would appear, if we go down this route, it would appear to be discriminatory to treat our customers differently simply based on the timing that they've became a natural gas customer. Because at the moment, if the new customers are outside of our electric territory, then they would be the only ones benefiting from the rebate program. That's if we change what we've currently have in place. So if a new policy on natural gas rebates is recommended, we must be careful and we should try to create a policy that is equitable across all customers so that we don't open ourselves up to a potential litigation or a reversal by the Florida Public Service Commission or an estoppel from the court system to make sure that we are treating all classes of customers fairly and the same.
Can I ask a clarifying question on that, Bianca, just to be clear? When you say new customers, do you mean non-customers that we are trying to induce to become customers? Because that's what I'm referring to.
Yes,
So
that is
even though
what
someone is not currently a customer,
right.
you're considering them a customer for the purposes of equitable treatment with these rebates. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay.
So they would be considered a new customer, a person who's not a customer of GRU, who doesn't have any other services provided to them by GRU. That is what I'm referring to.
Okay. Teresa?
I do have a question, kind of a point of clarification, because this is really. Excuse me. When we're talking about the GRU gas area versus the electric area, right? We don't want to discriminate from the gas to the electric for the different areas, so that they would all have to have the same gas rebate, but, right? Because that was a question you asked. Could we have GRU customers without, not in the electric territory, still get the rebate, and the ones in the electric area, because they're not already existing they're already existing customers, to not be able to get the rebate, right? Isn't that what you was asking, Jason?
What I was asking, I think we're saying the same thing, is that someone who is not currently a GRU customer at all, and we would say, we would like you to become a customer. In order to induce you to become a customer, here's a rebate to help you connect to our natural gas system. That's what I'm referring to.
So all the existing customers, you're saying that it would be discriminatory against the existing customers to not have the same rebate offered,
Right.
correct? But we already have different ways of dealing with customers already, whether they're in the city or if they're in the county, because we have different electric rates, whether you're in the county electric or you're in the city for electric and water. Don't we have different rates for that?
Mr. Chair, it's not different rates. I mean, I guess it depends on the language you use. So that they have the same rates. There is a surcharge for customers that are in the county that is allowed by state law, that allows for a municipality to have a surcharge for those customers that are not within the city limits. So that allows for that. Bianca may be able to talk more specifically to that. But it's the same rates, but then there's a surcharge for outside the city limits.
Okay, because it was just getting a little unclear with all the different languages.
Right. Anybody else have anything before we go to public comment?
Mr.
Yeah,
Chair,
go ahead.
so this just kind of piggybacking on what Member Sperlingwood was saying. If we're talking about only offering rebates to people who are outside the electric service area, and we're talking about keeping things fair for classes of customers, I would think that if you've got people who are electric and gas customers, and then you've got people who are only going to be gas customers, never going to buy electricity from GRU, at least as of right now, I would think that would could be defined as two different classes of customers, because it's not apples to apples, at least in my mind. It is, and I didn't phrase that as a question, but that's kind of a question. And then I'm just going to reiterate, because I've said this before at previous meetings, that as somebody who works in the development community, time and time again, when we're working on development plans, we're told by developers and contractors, we don't want gas, we don't need gas, nobody wants gas. And it's almost like they get strong-armed into buying the product. That's just a comment. Thank you.
Dan, were you wanting to comment?
Yeah, if Eric could, I had some follow-up, maybe some comments or questions. So you say over 50% of our customers, or our gas customers, are outside of the electric territory, right?
I was referring to, Chair members, I was referring to the rebates offered. So of the rebates, 54% of those are outside the current electric territory.
Right. And so GRU has no control over the mix of electric energy that's supplied to those customers. Is that correct?
Outside of our territory?
Right, outside
no.
of our territory. So if we were to incentivize those customers to outside of our electric territory, we would gain at least some control over their carbon emissions at that rate. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, so we go to member comment? I'm sorry, public comment? Is that okay? All right, so if you, member of the public would like to speak specifically to this issue, if you could be sure to state your name for the record and try to keep your comments to 3 minutes, please.
Good evening, Roberta Gastmeyer. I want to start off by saying I strongly support GRU as a public utility. I've had nothing but positive interactions with staff at all levels, and I really appreciate their dedication and commitment to this community. And I understand that GRU has worked really hard to, put policies in place that will reduce emissions, which makes this issue so frustrating for me that we've been talking about this for 2 years, carefully considering it for 2 years. It's widely recognized that the fight against climate change, we must electrify everything. This is so widely accepted, in fact, that the Inflation Reduction Act has made this a cornerstone of its policy. Under the IRA, households are eligible for up to $14,000 in subsidies to electrify their homes. These are incentives to switch from gas to electric and include rebates to upgrade to high-efficiency electric appliances, for electrical upgrades to the breaker box and wiring so that there are not obstacles for adding electrical appliances. A recent quote from the Virginia Mercury stated, "Gas utilities had better start planning for the end of their business. There's no longer any reason to expand and upgrade gas distribution pipelines, because from here on out, their customer base will be shrinking, not growing, and the result will be stranded assets." This transition to all electric homes is not going to happen slowly over 20, 30, 50 years. It's going to be happening in the next 10 years. GRU's gas rebates and the local propaganda surrounding the benefits of gas are in direct opposition to this transition. Insisting on the expansion of gas pipelines will leave us with stranded assets. What happens when those pipelines run out to new subdivisions and very few homeowners actually connect to the gas? And I know from personal experience, this is happening right now. Have we figured out how much these infrastructure expenses will add to the typical GRU customer bill? Who will absorb that extra expense? Will it be all GRU customers or just the few that are still hooked up to that gas? The notion that we will eventually use those pipes for green hydrogen is a pipe dream, no pun intended. It wastes precious time and money that would be better directed toward realistic and cost-effective options to reduce carbon. There are no data to support that running hydrogen through the natural gas pipelines is technically or financially feasible. In fact, the premier research institute on decarbonizing, the Rocky Mountain Institute, states that while future use of green hydrogen is likely for sectors like steel production and shipping, electrification is more efficient for most building uses. RMI also cites problems like hydrogen embrittlement, which can weaken pipes and increase leakage risk. And because hydrogen burns differently than methane and is about 3 times less energy intense or dense, it is less efficient when compared to electrifying. And to be clear, I am not here today to ask you to stop all the use of gas right away. But I am asking you to make a strong recommendation to the city that they stop this rebate program, which I find highly unequitable, since 88% of it goes to developers of high income housing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Nancy Darren. I will echo Barry and Jason and Roberta. Thank you for putting so much so eloquently. I totally agree there. I support GRU. We have a gem, we have a treasure. And my opposition to the natural gas expansion in wherever, inside, outside the territory, and these rebates is out of my concern for the future viability of our town, our utility, and being able to move into a far more robust fiscal situation looking forward through the most difficult time in the history of utilities. Methane, there are multiple bodies that methane is, it's closing the door on our opportunity to move forward. In the 5-year time span, it's 114 times worse for global warming than CO2. The health inside the home or with the leakage, VOCs, 42% higher rate of asthma in children and all kinds of health issues for people with gas. People are not wanting it or using it anymore. The high-end people are now going to induction. In the presentation, the 2020 and 2021 gas costs were used. At that time, gas was at $2.35. And now it's at $8 to $10 for the same amount. And we're shipping LNG out the wazoo to Europe because their energy costs are going through the roof. This is not stopping in the next few months or this winter. This is, Britain just acknowledged the next 3 years, it's only going to get worse. The whole fracked gas bubble is coming to an end. We are at the end of cheap, easy, high quality energy. And the discussions are so important, but this is going down a dead end that I am so worried for our utility that this is going to hurt us, not help us, and certainly not help our situation with costs for customers and for us. And we can't slow down. Yeah, it moves us away from our renewable goals. It's the wrong direction. And I know we can't do it overnight, but we can stop those rebates and not to worry about those other folks out there. What's it costing us now to lay all that pipe? We're in debt for some of that, right?
Thank you.
I love you guys. But we've got to make this work.
Thank you. Any other members of the public want to comment on this topic?
I would like to find out why the county is
If you
paying.
could also state your name for the record, please.
My name is Wendy Noon. I'm a researcher. Why the county pays more for gas and electric? It just seems this whole county-city imbalance. Duke Energy and other people having rights to areas within your territory is very mixed up for me. I don't think that that's so I don't think that that's a good way of working with people. You have a complete territory, and it seems like certain bites are taken out of it for other energy companies, and I would like to look into that, because and why is the county paying more? The county doesn't even get a right to vote because it's the county, doesn't have the right. And I wanted to ask you where to get an electric territory map of GRU's territory. And do you do fracking? Like, you don't? Okay. All right. And one more thing regarding the biodiesel plant. It seems like, that Gainesville was a tree sanctuary, and with more and more trees being taken down and more cement being put down, people are really not wanting to stay here. It's losing its health ability. And I mean, you could be growing hemp and getting you can be getting 6-foot tall plants every 3 months. We could be getting paper and clothing, and we could be making a profit, since again we're agricultural and we are tropical, hence the solar. Okay, thank you so much. I would again like to understand more why the county's paying a % higher. Thank you.
Any other members of the public want to comment on this topic? All right, so if I understand correctly, the staff recommendation is essentially essentially a recommendation for continuation of business as usual, right? Because the rebates exist, the rebates are continuing unless the city commission takes some sort of action. And so the staff recommendation is essentially asking us to endorse existing policy. Is that correct?
So, Mr. Chair, I guess I would characterize, I think the comments from the public are all things that we are looking at and evaluating. And so I would characterize it as slightly different as, yes, we continue what we're doing at this time. We don't stop rebates until we understand the consequences of doing that, the impact on existing customers, obviously, the rates that the bills that we have now, and folks, we want to make sure we understand what that impact is. We want to understand if other entities might come into the territory and answer some of those questions prior to us making a change such as this. And really, as we go through the IRP process, that is really going to lay out and address, I think, a lot of the questions that are brought up over how are we moving toward net zero resolution, and this being an element of that. And so what the recommendation is to continue what we're doing now as we continue to answer some of those questions and we develop the integrated resource plan.
Thank you. All right, so we have a staff recommendation. We could make a motion to that effect. We could take no action tonight, or we could make an entirely different motion. And do I understand correctly? I'm infrequently the chair. Do I understand correctly that I'm not able to make motions? Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
Correct.
So,
And what I would say is if we don't take the action tonight, I would ask that the board recommend what more information or what additional things would be helpful to keep the conversation moving forward. So if you could provide that direction, that would be helpful for staff as well.
members, where are folks at?
Mr. Chair, barring that anybody makes a motion to make some sort of recommendation tonight, one thing I would be interested in seeing is some sort of actual map of other providers of natural gas and or propane, and exactly their infrastructure, how feasible it would be for them to enter into our area and provide natural gas service. I think that would could be, because that excuse keeps coming up, and in lieu of seeing some actual geographical data, it's really hard to say. I'll just again echo my comments. I think it's kind of silly to be putting more stuff in the ground, building out infrastructure that could very well be obsolete. On the one hand, I feel like if we're not using natural gas to create energy, that's within the net zero goal, and just providing gas to people for other purposes is also kind of within that net zero goal. But ultimately, I think we're investing in a dinosaur, personally.
Other members? Well, so if no one is interested in making a motion tonight, does anybody else have any other clarifying questions or other information? I agree with Member Rockwell, specifically that information request is of interest to me as well. Other folks have any questions that would help them on this issue moving forward? Yeah, go ahead, Fletch.
I'd like to see this issue become part and parcel of the IRP rather than stand on its own merits tonight or the next meeting. I'd like to see it as part of an overall energy policy strategy for Gainesville and for GRU.
Okay. Anybody else? Any other comments before we, I guess, leave this item? Okay. Next item on our agenda is the IRP update. Speaking of which.
So yeah, Mr. Chair, members, Eric Walters back again. He is going to give an update on the integrated resource plan and kind of the status of where we are and where we're headed. And so again, obviously this is one of the most important things we're going to be doing over the next year for the utility and our community, is laying out what is the direction forward from a power generation and power supply standpoint. And so, we really, as we enter this, we want to have transparency and engagement with the community. We want the input and doing this together so we really have a path forward that makes sense and we represent our community well. And so as part of that, and Eric will talk about, is a public engagement part of this process as opposed to just a technical assessment. And so with that, before I take too much of the thunder, I'll let Eric kind of give the presentation.
Thank you, Tony. Chair members, Eric Walters, GRU Chief Sustainability Officer. Here to talk about the integrated resource plan and kind of give you an update or an overview. The IRP is a very important part, as Tony mentioned, of our plan forward, reaching our net zero goal by 2045. The UAB and the City Commission have both expressed a lot of interest in it. And so we want to make sure that we're bringing back the right information and keeping you updated on what's going on. Because it is such an integral part of the 2045 goals, you guys have expressed and others have expressed wanting input into that process. And so tonight I'm really going to give you an update of the process and then point out specifically the points where we've designed into the process for you to get that input. So let's talk about the IRP. We are shepherding in an integrated resource plan, or IRP, to help evaluate our long-term generation options. So it consists of two components right now. We have a community engagement component and then a technical analysis component. And I'll get into a little more what that looks like later. So each component we expect to take approximately 6 months to complete. GRU is working with a consultant to help frame and execute our community engagement plan. I'll give you a little bit more information about that as well. And the results of the community engagement will impact the overall results of the IRP. So we talked about community engagement here, and it's a little bit different take than what we've done in the past, but it is a very important step in the process. We've had a number of conversations with other utilities, JEA, OUC, Tallahassee, and they have all embarked on a similar process of gathering input from the public, concerned citizens group, industry, all the customers about what they want to see in an energy plan and possible opportunities for collaboration there. So in this ever-changing market, we kind of see this customer engagement part as kind of an industry standard going forward. So we mentioned to you, we put out an invitation to negotiate, or an ITN, for a community engagement consulting firm. It was issued on August 10th, and the responses were due September 9th, so we're in the process of that. We're evaluating those responses. Due to the law and the ITN process, we're actually in a cone of silence, so we can't discuss who and how many and all that stuff. But we can tell you the overall, that the next steps are looking at their evaluations, any vendor presentations that we decide to bring in to help us with that community engagement, and also some scope surrounding that engagement. And we're aiming to come back to you and to the City Commission in November with a recommendation for that vendor. So it's one of those things that when we talk about community engagement, we're not just sending someone out to the community and say, bring us back numbers, right? GRU wants to be heavily involved in that process. Not only the creation of that process, but also the execution. So we want to be at these meetings. We want to be talking to customers. We want to be talking to these groups and getting that feedback firsthand. Some of the benefits of that is number one, engagement, being able to talk to the customers and get their feedback. Number two is buy-in. As we move through this process, knowing how we got to those points is critical for the acceptance on the other end. And as well as an opportunity for education. If you ask the average person what an IRP is, they probably couldn't tell you. Well, this is an opportunity to help educate them on that. Not only that, but how our electric system works, what we consider when we're making modifications or improvements to that system, and how that may affect them. So there will be defined opportunities for board input to this process. And the community engagement, not only with customers and community groups, but also with the UAB and the City Commission. So we envision having workshops and one-on-one interviews with each one of you and each one of the commissioners. We also envision having that community feedback be analyzed by this third party and kind of rank with priority, and then bringing those back to you to help finalize the priorities before we go into the technical analysis portion of this. So let's take a look at an overall process. I wish I had one of those buttons, you know, when you go to the mall and it says "you are here" kind of thing. So when you look at this process, you are here, right? We are communicating the plan for the IRP right now. If you look at this board, it's kind of broken down into 3 different areas, or we've affectionately named them swim lanes. So when you look at these swim lanes, there are 3. Number 1 is the community. The second is governing bodies, and the third is the technical. Now, this is also a rough timeline of when things will happen, right, as far as order. So some things may occur concurrently, but most of these happen in some sort of sequence. So the first part of this is obviously engaging this third party, which we've talked about before, helping determine the community view of future generation, determine their priorities, affordability, environmental impact, reliability, whatever those are. So engaging that firm and then setting up those community meetings to receive feedback and analyzing those. If you drop down to this middle lane of governing bodies, you see these 3 stars, and those are really defined points that are set aside for governing bodies to give input into the process. So this first is, once this community feedback is analyzed, pushing that back and giving that information to the UAB and the City Commission. At that point, you will also have the opportunity to have the one-on-one interviews and have the opportunity for input to what goes into that plan. You have the evaluation of options and feasibility. So what can we do? What can't we do? You know, what technology is there? We've talked about renewable natural gas and all those things, but how much will there be, and is it something to consider at this point? So we'll evaluate these feasibility options here. When you look at the third swim lane, this is really the technical part. Some of these things have happened already. In other words, we've gotten some updated prices for available technology. So we've gone and partnered with an engineering firm to get that information to make sure it's the most up to date. So when we roll into the IRP, the prices will be as up to date as possible, right? That will go into, again, priorities and ranking. Finalize the criteria for what we can do. What are the options? What scenarios are we going to study? What are the priorities coming out of those? And then that comes back to this governing board, the UAB and the City Commission, to communicate the final inputs and scenarios. So essentially, you get an opportunity to say, yes, these are scenarios that we want. This is what we want to see. These are the inputs that we've agreed on, and these are our priorities going into this. That kicks off the technical analysis, the heart of it here, okay? So when that technical analysis gets going and completes, all of those results and recommendations will be brought back not only to the community, but also to the governing boards to recommend a step forward, a path forward. So when you look at the technical analysis, that component we envision to be done by the Energy Authority. GRU is a member of the Energy Authority, and so it provides a significant cost benefit for us to be able to do that. The cost of the IRP is actually included in what we partner and pay T today, so there's no additional cost to complete that analysis. During the last IRP process, there was a little bit of a misunderstanding about TEA and how it works. And we heard feedback like, TEA doesn't have any renewables and they shouldn't be included in this process. Well, actually, that's true. TEA doesn't own any renewables, megawatts. They own exactly 0 megawatts. Okay, they are representing other entities in the market. So GRU, TEA serves 7 members, which GRU is one of, and over 50 clients out there in the market. And what happens is, as TEA goes out to the market on behalf of those entities then say, hey, I pledge my megawatts to you to be able to fulfill those deals, right? They never take ownership. They never are responsible for operating and maintaining. They go out and they're a market agent for that. As a result of that, though, they have been called on to help solicit RFPs for renewable energy. So they've done over 25,000 megawatts of basically contract for wind, solar, storage, and also conventional generation. So they've represented other entities in gathering inputs either into IRPs or to actually build and put on the ground for those. So there are about 20 renewable RFPs that they've done over the past 5 years, about 2,000 megawatts or so, about $1.5 billion in a notional value. So what that does for us is that translates to a benefit for knowledge and experience of what's going on in the market. They can help us optimize our options, and they can also help us to make sure that we're including all of the options that are viable for us. All right, so once the technical analysis starts, it'll be about 6 months, potentially longer, depending on the number of scenarios. And then we're trying to do as much work as we can up front to make sure that we hit the ground running. But you'll see all of that work in the output of that before it goes forward. So as has been mentioned a couple of times already today, there's a lot of price volatility that's happened. The commodity and finished industrial goods prices have come off record highs, but they're forecasted to remain elevated through this process. Many of the commodities of important financial modeling for the IRP, things like silica, copper, lithium, et cetera, they'll continue to see high demand in prices. Actually, when we did a market ask, energy storage providers are now indexing their product prices to commodities. They're no longer giving fixed prices because the prices are changing so rapidly and so dynamically. They're fixing them to an index, and whenever they go to build them, that's the index and that's the price that you pay. So there's a lot of volatility that's there. There's a lot of change that's happening with that, right? So we can look at that in one of two ways. Because the IRP is iterative and incremental, which means that we're not doing this today and then just writing this out for the next 30 years. We're going to do it today and get an outcome from that. And then 5 years from now, we're going to redo this process again. And then 3 to 5 years after that, we're going to redo this process again. What it does is it doesn't lock you into the pricing that you get from this volatility. It gives you an opportunity to kind of come off of that a little bit. It also gives you the opportunity to start factoring in and pricing in new technology as it becomes available. Things that are in their infancy today may be mature 5 years from now, and we can now include them as options to our plan. And so that's the idea, is that this IRP isn't a one and done, do it, throw it on the shelf, and just execute according to what comes out of it. It really is a look at what's best now, what's available now, what are those options now, make some steps in the near future to move us towards that goal, and then you go back and you step a study and you do it again. That gets you the incremental approach that you have. You don't buy all today what you may need 20 years from now. You buy a little bit today, make your progress, make your plan to get there, and as you make your plan, it may shift with the next one because, hey, there's more technology available, or the cost of this technology has come down dramatically. We need to be looking at that now. So it's built into the process because it's iterative, because we're going to do it multiple times over the course of our path to 2045. It does help us to offset some of the near-term costs, but also take advantage of things that will be coming down the road. And with that, I think I'm done. Any questions?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I appreciate the work you guys have put into this and to incorporating the UAB into the process. Several members of this board were very interested in getting involved in the IRP and still are. I was not necessarily one of them at the beginning, although I'm sort of coming around to the idea that this probably is a very valuable discussion to have. My question, and I've missed a few meetings here and there, why are we paying for a consultant for community outreach, a firm, which is probably going to be very expensive? It seems like if there's not people at GRU already, hiring a few people would be more efficient, having them in-house, people who maybe are familiar with the community, not some company from who knows where. I just don't want to. I don't want our desire to be involved in this process to create a financial beast, and you know, is this adding to O&M? Where is this fitting into the budget? Thank you.
Chair members, that's a great question of why are we doing this? Why are we doing the third party? We do a lot of GRU in the neighborhood outreaches now. We do go out into the community and we have conversations with folks. We do answer questions and provide education at those different meetings, correct? But we've all acknowledged that the IRP is a very important step to our 2045 goal, right? It is almost the first step to get there. What comes out of this IRP is going to heavily influence how we put that plan together. What we want to make sure is that we do have engagement from the entire community. We want to make sure that we do have engagement from all of our customers, from all of our customer bases, different demographics across the city, across the utility. We want to make sure that we don't have one group heavily influencing the entire process for everyone else. We want it to be fair and equitable across the board. And so when we simply just do, you know, GRU in the neighborhood, we may be in that neighborhood and we may get that demographic and we may do it different places, but are we getting a representative sample of all of our customer base? Well, that I can't tell you. Is it just the vocal few that are coming out, or is it really representing your entire customer base? That's part of the expertise that this third party will bring to us. And it seems like, you know, it may not be necessary, but I think it is as you go through this iterative process. We're going to do this more than one time. The information, the plans, the engagement process that we get and learn from this will be applied to future IRPs. It's not like it's a one and done and it goes out the window. There's valuable information that comes back from that. When we talk to other folks that went through this process, I mentioned OUC and JA and Tallahassee. They all spoke to the importance of making sure that the entire customer base was represented. They do a lot of the same things that we do today before this process, and they just felt like it wasn't adequate. The information that they got back told them that what they were doing just wasn't adequate to get the proper engagement and the proper feedback from the entire community and the entire customer base. So that's why you see this trend of folks doing it this way, is hiring consultants to make sure that everyone is represented, everyone is heard. And so they saw tremendous benefit in that as well.
Teresa? I think Teresa was up next. Oh, okay.
Oh, go ahead. Somebody
had their thing.
Yeah, but, yeah. Go ahead, Teresa.
I just wondered, in the IRP, it talks about environmental impact, which could be positive or negative. And so I don't see sustainability. I mean, I know that's basically what it is, but I'd like to see somewhere in all the paperwork where it talks about what sustainability means for us. What is it? So I looked up the definition because I wanted to make sure we were all talking the same thing, and I want to make sure we could have it. Sustainability consists of fulfilling the needs of the current generation without compromising the needs of future generations, while ensuring a balance between economic growth, environmental care, and social well-being. And I think if we put some of that into what this when we talk about things, if we bring some of that conversation there and let everybody know that's part of what we're talking about, it would be better than IRP, because for a lot of folks, IRP, they don't really get what the whole plan is, and maybe we need to talk about what the plan is. That's just my thoughts on that.
Chair, can I?
Sure.
Chair members, that is an excellent point. And so me standing up as the Chief Sustainability Officer and ultimately responsible for this process for the utility, you're exactly right. Those are the things that we're going to be telling the public, that we're going to be putting out to everyone as we go through this process. And I think when we go to do that community engagement, that third-party firm, since they would have done this before, also brings that expertise of how to hone in that message to the customer, to make sure that they understand that, to make sure that they may not know what an IRP is, but they know we're going to factor in, hey, how does it affect socially people? What's the cost? That we're not going to ignore that. And we're also going to consider the environmental impact as well. And the best approach for this entire utility, as we've talked about before, is going to be a balanced approach that doesn't ignore any of those factors.
Right. Chair, I just think that a lot of people don't get it when you say IRP or your plan. They don't understand the whole concept of it. So I think it would be helpful if we included something about that when we talk about it in general.
Thank you.
I think your approach is the right way to go. And I've been through your organization, your organization now, and you have a lot of smart engineers. And you know kind of how to operate this utility today. This whole thing's changing in a big way. And so what do you call it? Having some outside help, by the way, you don't have an extra 3 engineers to work on hydrogen, an extra 2 over here to work on storage, look into the lithium and all the things that are coming down the road. You just don't have extra people to do that. Your people are smart enough, if you get some outside help that's already been through some of the RFPs and been through some of this, to catch on and absorb some of that as you go along. So that's why this makes a lot of sense. And there are half a dozen technologies out there, not 1 or 2 that are being proposed. So it's not going to be an easy journey.
Fletch, was you next? Yeah.
Thank you, Eric. A lot of us here are veterans of going through the last IRP, and I think it's fair to say that the members of the UAB that examined the last IRP in general were extremely disappointed in that document. Very, very, very disappointed and dissatisfied. And we're looking for this new one to really try to correct a lot of the shortcomings from the last one. And I've jotted down a few of the points that we had discussed earlier that were missing or inadequate in the last one. And I'll send an email to Robin for distribution to you, put on paper some of these ideas that might be a little more focused rather than just coming off the top of my head right now. But just at the top of my head, I have a dozen here that we mentioned earlier that we were very displeased about. The last time the IRP came out, we thought the treatment of renewables was just a lick of a promise, just not at all thorough. There was no particular interest in biomass, which we feel is extremely important for GRU. One of the major issues that we had with the last GRP was that it really didn't deal with the question of the cost of borrowing money in New York, which is really the great stumbling block to changes and investment here for GRU. The cost of money on the mortgage market is extremely important and governs really as a gating factor what we do here. As you know, one of the things that the UAB discussed before the IRP was the lack of demand management. So we're looking really for a lot of demand management in this new one. Another thing that was lacking, as you know, in the last one, was there was nothing about research. In a city that has the incredible engineering resources of University of Florida and so on, here in Gainesville, research For example, we've talked about green energy, green hydrogen tonight, things like that. That is really available to us in spades here in the GRU service area. It wasn't mentioned at all in the last IRP. In addition to that, there was no real focus on the impact on prices. And I think everybody in this room would agree that every time the term GRU is mentioned, every time, of course, cost of electricity, cost of prices is always the most instantaneous thing that erupts at that moment. So that is the one thing that's really on the minds of people in our service district here. And so it really needs to be a major focus of the new IRP. In addition to that, the last IRP was structured like a Chinese menu. You could have one of these, you could have two of those, you could have this one and that one, you could have this one, or you could have that one, or you might want this one, or that one's a possibility. That's a Chinese menu. That's not a plan. There is a huge difference between a Chinese menu and a plan. And we're looking for GRU to make recommendations through the City Commission, of course, and the new mayor, and through the UAB, of what we would recommend be our structure over time. Obviously, when you have elections and you have new members coming in the City Commission, new mayors or whatever it may be, obviously you're not going to be able to control future plans, but at least we can have recommended directions. And there was none of that last time around. It was all just simply Chinese menu, which really doesn't say a thing. And then lastly, there was, of course, discussion of batteries at the cost of storage that was in existence then. But for us to really have a strong focus on the future of renewables, new engineering data has to be there, not the old numbers that were such a difficulty. So you can see that we studied the IRP before it with quite a bit of certainty, and we found it came up lacking. So we're looking to you, Eric, to help make sure this new one really has what we need for our future.
Sure.
So, Chair, members, Member Corral, I appreciate your comments for that, and you're right. I was there for the presentation of the 2019 IRP, and that was a completely different animal than this one. Okay, and so I assure you that the things that you listed will be addressed in this next one. And I can go down the list really quickly here. With the treatment of renewables, the primary base case will have to meet the 2045 renewable goal, right? So that's the base case, and that's what we're going to measure everything from, as we did last time. So when we look at that, that'll be the base case that you'll look at, and everything will be compared in cost, either less or more than that. When you look at biomass, the last IRP did recommend a second biomass plant because it's necessary for synchronous generation. In other words, we have to have something stable to depend on to firm up the energy of all the solar that was projected. So there were actually two biomass plants that's there. The difference between this one and the last one is that the last one ended in 2039, right? So going to 2045, what happens is you go past the retirement date of the existing biomass plant. So you factor in the entire cost of potential retirement of the first and having to build an additional one or maybe two biomass plants. So the extension of the time frame of study will address that for the biomass. The cost of money will be factored in. It will be at a utility rate of how we can borrow it, and it'll be probably presented at a net present value, so the discount rate will be decided upon at that time. But that money will be accounted for at the time of study. DSM is an excellent point. We are actually looking at an outside firm to update our DSM inputs into this IRP. We had one during the previous, not the previous 2019, but the previous 2006 one, right? So we're taking those options, updating them, and also adding to the additional demand side management that's available. So this IRP will incorporate DSM into the study. The research, when you look at available technology, you can't include in an IRP aspirational technology. It has to be commercially available at the time that you study. Once you include aspirational technology, your plan goes out the window because it's not based on real numbers. And so what we're looking at and studying is commercially available technology at the time of study. The beautiful thing about an IRP is that it is iterative and it is incremental, so that things that may be in their infancy today, when we study it 3 to 5 years from now, may be commercially available technology that we can include in the next one and then take advantage of as necessary. So the research, we have limited to what's commercially available. Doing anything else is just hoping, and that's not a real plan. When you look at the impact on prices, we've already engaged with BFA and said we want to see of each of these plans the CapEx, capital expenditures, the O&M cost, the fuel, all of those things will be accounted for, and we can roll out the impact to rates over that 25-year period. We're already having discussions about that. And as far as batteries go, when we looked at batteries in 2019, the final report came out in 2019. The process started in 2018, which means that the information was probably from 2017, right? So that's where that information came from. When we start this process, we've already engaged with an engineering firm that will give us the most up-to-date pricing for battery technology advancements, and we have to lock it down for the study. We can't change it in the middle of it, but when we lock it down, it'll be the most accurate that we know to date, based on industry, based on the latest products that were produced, based on any information that engineering firm can find and vet to say this is the price of building that. So all of those things that you mentioned will come to an IRP, will come to an output, and will go directly into the creation of the plan.
Thank you.
Any other member comment or questions for Eric on this?
Sorry, to close that out, as Eric said, I think there's a lot that we can learn from the last IRP. The one thing I will add is in the middle of that IRP is when the City Commission adopted the net zero resolution. So that some of that was expanded and some things were added, but there was some discontinuity because of that change in the middle of the process. Whereas this process, we have that in place, and that is, like, as Eric said, will be the base case that everything will work from. So I think that'll be, it'll just be clearer understanding of the direction that the City Commission has given really for the IRP and for the basis for that. The other thing is we did not do public engagement side and did not do as much engagement that we're really looking for through this process. And so, that is why we're moving in the direction we're doing, is trying to do a much better, robust analysis this time that really takes into account the community at large, the governing boards, and so that we are answering those questions through the process. And so, we're looking forward to the next year and really getting into that and getting into the nuts and bolts over the time. So thanks, and Eric answered those questions well. Thanks, Eric.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. The big question that was kind of hanging over my head with all this was wondering what the Energy Authority's specific sort of expertise and experience was in developing IRPs for communities that have the sort of aspirational goals that we do. And I just wanted to say thank you. You really specifically addressed that point tonight in your presentation, so I wanted to thank you for that and for the presentation as a whole. I thought it was really well laid out, and I'm excited personally about the public engagement process that you've laid out. So, go ahead.
This net zero by 2045. Define net zero. Does that include, what do you call it, you can't create any carbon, or you could create carbon if you capture it, sequester it?
Right, it's really an offset when you look at net zero, when you're looking at that scale, how we're defining it. So you can create CO2 emissions on this side, but you have to offset it somehow on this side. So that's where we get the net zero.
Does that mean also you could buy it from somebody else?
The plan right now doesn't envision a lot of buying. There really isn't a renewable market out there per se that we could pull from. There are some defined products that are out there right now, but no renewable market or somewhere we can go to and say all the power that we buy will be renewable. So there will be some purchases from the market, but those would be envisioned either in a purchase power agreement so we can verify the source and the environmental attributes that come from those. That may be a part of the plan, but I don't envision that being a huge portion of how we meet the load.
So there is general public comment for anything that we haven't talked about tonight coming up next. Is there any public comment specifically related to the IRP before we move on from this topic? Thank you, Eric.
Good evening, Nancy Darren. Thank you, Eric, very much. So I'm really curious. We are also members of APPA, which has a vast body of information, grants, research, and I'm curious why we aren't incorporating or utilizing them. Is there an expectation of looking at different rate structures? I know there's been a lot of discussion over the past few years in the larger utility industry about the current rate structures really lock us into a lot of situations that are going to make this transition far more challenging. And there was one other thing too. So the other thing I think is really important, yes, we have a goal of the net zero and it's focused on CO2, but CO2 is one little piece of a much bigger problem. The methane is a problem. All kinds of commodities are problems. And so I think it really behooves us, if we're going to look at what is actually sustainability or viability, we have to look at greenhouse gases as a whole and not only CO2, or we're going to make some mistakes. So looking at NOx, looking at VOCs, looking at methane, and how are we going to look at dealing with those very real issues. Thank you.
Any other citizen comments specifically related to the IRP issue? All right, that moves us to general public comment. If any members from the public would like to speak to any issues that were not on the agenda tonight. And just as a reminder, if you could restate your name and try to keep your comments to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Angela Castile. I actually have several questions. Sorry. Will there be peak use charges with the new meters?
If you want to go ahead and run through your questions.
Okay,
Yeah,
yep.
sure.
What happened to the FP&L tie-ins that were supposed to happen this year? What is the definition of a full deposit that is not in 27-7 of the municipal code, nor in Appendix A, but the standard is defined by amount? So how is a full deposit determined? The standard deposits are electric, $145, water, $35, wastewater, $40, gas, $50. And lastly, why have additional deposits not been assessed since August of 2019? And where or how do we come to that? Okay, where or how do we come to that? The point, the highest and the lowest additional deposit was $50. I find that hard to believe.
Okay, thanks. Tony, did you want to respond to that?
Sure. So the first question was about peak use charges with new meters. So at this time, we don't have any changes in rate structures or anything like that planned for. But the new meters, the smart meters, do allow us to start looking at things like time of use and different demand charges and all different than what we have now. We don't have any plans at this point, but that is something that we can evaluate. And in fact, appreciate the comment. I think with new commissioners coming on board, that may be something where we're looking at our rate structures and bringing those to the UAB, like our tiering structures. There's been a lot of questions this summer. This could be a good opportunity for us to evaluate those, bring that to the UAB as well as the new commissioners as they come on. So that'll be something we can and should be looking at and always evaluating and looking at best practices and what's best for our customers and the community. In terms of there was not an FPL tie-in that was supposed to happen this year. I don't know now, Tony, you might need to help me, but a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, there was discussion about a potential tie-in with FPL that did not proceed forward. Direction was not given from the City Commission to do those tie-ins. We're always looking at, and actually as part of the IRP, we'll be evaluating transmission tie-ins as well as power generation, of looking at how we provide power to our customers. So that will be part of that evaluation as we get into the IRP process. Okay, there were several questions about the deposit. I got to tell you, I don't think I'm going to be able to give clear answers now. So I think that's something that we'll follow up with our Chief Customer Officer, Mr. Hutchinson, that can provide those more detailed, because I could speculate on a couple of them, and I don't want to give answers that aren't fully correct. So that's something we can follow up and provide that information on the deposits. And I think that was it.
Any other members of the public?
Hello, my name is Faith Kerr. I am one from last month that was having issues with my bill. And I'd stated again when they were voting last week that it did bottleneck me because I was estimated, which goes into the tier thing. So I had kind of researched a little bit because I'm learning on all of this. So thank you for breaking down sustainability and these different types of things, because I'm learning. But I had noticed that when I was estimated at 83 kilowatts for 1 month for my utility bill, obviously that was wrong. So when the next month came, it was like 1,200 kilowatts was pushed into tier 2, which was an astronomical amount, because normally that would have been split out differently had it not been estimated. So Mr. Cunningham had Mr. Hutchinson call me and kind of talk to me about it, but I was the one that was pushing because I'm trying to figure all this out. And I asked customer service first, because they have their tier of people you speak to before you can get to a certain level. That's what we're told at customer service anyway. And so my question is when we're getting estimated on our bills, how many of us are really getting charged tier 2 because of an estimation, when really, if they had the readers come out or whatever it is, that it would be in a normal range of energy being used. And so they ended up sending it back to billing, and they credited me $30 back off of my questions with it of splitting it up differently. But I sat there and thought, how many people wouldn't know to question that? Why are we still estimating? And I know that it was mentioned that there's going to be electronic readers next year. Well, let's think about what there was like 1,000 people who have been disconnected. They don't know to ask about this stuff. It's a billing issue. Again, it's a labor issue. Again, if they don't question, I mean, it just kind of seems like GRU would have been getting extra money from me had I not questioned it. And I don't have the money to pay the $506 that's due right now. And I don't qualify for anything, which that was something that we had discussed previously. But there's a range of us, whether you're single, you don't have kids, whatever it is, there's a range of us that have no ability of assistance to help for this. So as I'm learning this, you guys are voices for us also, that there's a very large group of us that don't qualify for any of this stuff. And we also don't understand a lot about all the additional charges that there are, the taxes for being in Gainesville. There's a lot of stuff that just is not very clear for us to be able to question, but we need more understanding to it, because it seems like there's a lot of us that may be paying a lot more than we should be paying. So I just wanted to bring that up because it affects a lot of people. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment tonight? All right. Any member comment this evening? I just had one thing tonight on member comment. There was an interesting letter to the editor. I do a sort of like a Google search for GRU. Anytime GRU comes up in the news, I get a notification of it, which isn't always good for my mental well-being. But there was a good letter to the editor recently that was talking about light pollution from streetlights. I'm not sure if you all saw that or not. And the reader was talking about pretty simple retrofits that can be made to our streetlights that would basically make them more neighborhood friendly and lead to less light pollution. And so I just was wondering if that had made it on anybody else's radar and if that's something that has been discussed at all at the utility.
So, Mr. Chair, I did not see the article. So GRU, just for everybody's knowledge, so we offer rental lights for private entities like parking lots and things like that, where we pay to install the lights. Then we have a fee that folks pay for those rental lights. We also do that for street lights, but we are not, GRU does not determine which style of those lights or, the kind of the light pollution issue. That would be like our Public Works or Alachua County Public Works that is determining the type of light they have and the expansion of the brightness and kind of where that expands. And so that really is a question for that end customer, which is, like I said, typically City of Gainesville Public Works or Alachua County Public Works for those street lights. And then if it's light pollution on, in parking lots or, things like that at Walmart or something like that, then that would be that private entity that is requesting that light. We do have, so GRU standards have a lot of different light types. I mean, a lot of different types, and those entities choose which of those they're looking for in the particular use that they have.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Just to be clear, it's not, GRU is not just saying, hey, you can install these lights if you want. It's in the land development code for the city and the county. There are requirements for especially public spaces like parking lots, and you have to get a lighting engineer to do a lighting plan. So it's required at the municipal level that lights be installed. Now, of course, what kind is as he said, up to the end user. But just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And then lastly, I just want to make sure and give a plug out. I know there's a lot of folks in the community that are obviously hurting right now with utility bills. I've been a long-time volunteer. Other folks on this board have as well, with a local organization called the Community Weatherization Coalition. And what we do is, as volunteers, we go into people's homes. I just did one a weekend ago, and I spent about 3.5 hours at somebody's house with them, going through their GRU bill line by line, helping them understand their bill, the different charges, things like that. And then we also bring a nice little kit with us that while we're there, we can change out light bulbs, we can help insulate some things, we can put in water-saving fixtures, different things while we're there that we know will result in a change in people's bill, the very next bill. And then we also refer people. We have a whole range of different services that we refer people to, some of them regardless of income, where they can get additional assistance, both in retrofitting their home and also saving, on their utility bill. So I would really encourage anybody that hasn't already looked into that, that's struggling with their bills, to get in touch with the Community Weatherization Coalition. It's absolutely free service, and they bring probably $100 or so worth of materials to your house that they will directly install while they're there. So I just wanted to put in a plug for that. If there's not any other member comment, then Robin, can you talk to us about our next meeting date? On the agenda it just says next meeting date.
Chair Foltz, can I just add one thing? So really appreciate the plug. So there are multiple agencies like the CWC, great agencies, great folks, a lot of volunteers to help. Again, going to the GRU website, calling customer service, if you didn't get the reference, is another way to get to those types of agencies like the CWC. So really encourage customers, if you're at that point, to try to look for those resources in a lot of different ways to help customers directly hit.
So, excuse me, the next workshop is on 9/27. That's the last Tuesday of this month. I did want to ask if you have a preference. We had scheduled the group that you invited, the Environmental Justice Group, and they have said they can't come. So did you have a preference of what you want to discuss on that agenda?
Well, members? Member Crow?
I've got a question. We keep talking about having a sort of an interim report on the AIM program. Have we had that yet, or is that still outstanding?
Mr. Chair, we did, I can't remember the meeting, but it was a couple of meetings ago.
Okay, so we
did
had
provide
that.
update
Okay,
on
so
the automated metering
I may have missed that one. All right. Now, what about the monthly report? Will we have our standard monthly report next time?
So, Mr. Chair, what we're doing is we're doing the very detailed quarterly report, and monthly we're providing a few highlights as part of the State of the Utility. So I had highlighted a few things at the beginning of the meeting. The idea would be that monthly will be those, and then the quarterly will have that more detailed report that we had been working on together.
I might offer a suggestion. If you think it's a good idea, you might want to take the last iteration of that quarterly report and let's discuss it at the workshop and really get into whether there are things that you would like us to add or things that you feel are not, because we've danced around that a little bit, but we haven't really delved into it, and that would be very helpful for staff if we had an idea, especially since we're going to quarterly, if we had an idea of what you all would like to see that might be missing. But that's your call, so.
Folks okay with that as a
I'd like
discussion point at the
I'd like to
workshop?
second the motion. We were asked earlier to do sort of analysis of the first test version of the first draft, and we had some ideas and so forth, but I'd like to see that sort of processed institutionally.
And I would say, I mean, with that meeting, I think we can probably manage more than one item for that meeting. So unless anybody has something that is on their mind right now, what I might ask too is that folks take a look at the work plan over the next couple of days. Robin, maybe you could even send us out the most updated version of the work plan. And if you see some things on there that we want to be talking about soon, then communicate that to Robin. Mm-hmm. Please.
Not to interrupt, just I think, and I think I probably speak for Chair Jacobson as well. It'd be nice to get an update on what the next steps on the utility. I'm drawing a blank on what we were calling it, the utility plan that the UAB worked on for several years, and we did Member Lewis, the energy policy. Thank you very much. Member Lewis did some community outreach, and now it's just kind of been languishing. And I'm not saying that it's ready for prime time, but it would be nice to know at least what the next steps are for that document.
So, Chair, I guess the question, so that's something the board produced and created, so I mean, I think it's up to the board you can have that discussion at that meeting, if you want to work on that, finalize it, or bring the other members up to speed, that would be something the board would work on, and then the board determine what the next step is for that.
And it might be useful, particularly given how long it's been since we've talked about that, if particularly our newer members could get a copy of that as well. It's kind of a primer if we're going to discuss that at the meeting, because it has been a minute since we've talked about that. Anything else related to the workshop agenda? Okay, well, I believe that brings us to the end here. Thanks for everybody being here tonight, members and members of the public. And I'll adjourn the meeting.
They're back, and they're out to get you.
Blood was drained out of their bodies.
Fight the